Greetings everyone. Recently I had a question about how to scrape a page with authentication. So that's what I'm going to look at in this section. We're going to look at two methods to scrape a page with authentication. One is with request first, and the other one is going to be with Puppeteer. So let's take a look first at the page that we're going to access with authentication and scrape. So it's going to be our good old faithful Craigslist that we all know now. And we're going to log in to Craigslist on this My Account over here. And if you don't have an account already, just go ahead and create one. It's really fast and easy to do. So once we log in, well, we get to this page when we are logged in, where we can access our postings that we made. And our objective in this section is basically going to be to log in and then access the billing page, the tab we have over here. So that's going to be our objective. And well, it's going to be similar to other scraping projects that you might do in the future, where you need to log in first and then access some other page when you are logged in. So now first I'm going to talk about how Craigslist is authenticating us, and then we're going to look at how to do this inside of request. So first, let me show you by example how Craigslist is actually authenticating us when we log in. Click on the My Account up here, and then you need to make an account with your email first, and then we can try out and see how we authenticate ourselves. So press Command Option I or Control Shift I if you're on Windows to open up the Chrome developer menu. Go inside the Network tab here and make sure that you have Preserve Log enabled, so it doesn't clear the log when the page is reloading or you get navigated to another page as you log in. Then click on the recording button, make sure it's recording, and then try and click on Login. So here we go. And now I'm logged in. And then I'm going to stop the recording so I don't get more requests in my log. And then you can see here our very first request is called Login, which sounds pretty promising for what we're trying to do. And in here, you can see there's a request URL for accounts.craigslist.org login. It's a post method, which is usually what login methods are. They are post request to a specific endpoint, such as login. And then we can see a response headers. There's a cookie being set here. We also have a request header here. We also have a cookie set already when we make the request. Then we have the form data, which is being passed from our form when we log in. So here you can see my email and my password that I passed from the form, the previous form. So if I go log out, I will show you the form. So here's the form with the email and the password. And this is what is getting passed to this endpoint with a post request in the form data we have here. Here's the input email handle, and here's the password. And this then gets sent via a post request to this endpoint up here. Now this is how a lot of sites login work. They basically make a post request to an endpoint, and then a cookie gets set. And here we can see a session cookie is being set. It says CL session, probably for Craigslist session, and then it has a long string here. So now when we log in, a cookie gets set on our browser, and then Craigslist can see on this cookie that we are authenticated. And you can also see a max age on this cookie here. So this is when the cookie has expired and we need to log in again. A lot of sites work this way, and you just have to dig in the network tab and try and figure out what kind of data is being sent to this form and how do we then authenticate ourselves. And now I'm going to show you how we can replicate this inside of Postman so we can try and see how we can also do this request. So now we looked inside of the network tab in Chrome Developer Tools. We figured out which request in this log had the login request, and we also saw the request headers and the form data for this request to log in. And now let's see if we can replicate this request inside of Postman instead of inside of the browser. So Postman is sort of the next step before we move on to using request inside of Node.js. It makes it easier for us to debug how to actually pass this login request and get ourselves logged in. So let me show you how we do this. First, let's go and take the request URL from the login request we have, this post request. Let's copy that and paste it in here. Now make sure to put the request method, this one, to be the same as we have in here. So make sure to save it as post, which is the same as we had inside Chrome Dev tab. And now we need to pass in some kind of data or form data. To do that, go into the body tab here, and usually the forms data is in XVVV form URL encoded, that is basically as a web form or HTML form. There's also form data in raw binary. Most of the forms is in this. Some, for example for APIs, can also be in this data, but it's not so often that you see it. So make sure to select this one. If you want to be really sure what kind of data is being passed to this endpoint, you can check it inside of the Chrome Developer Tools. So if you go inside of the, let's see here, we have the request headers. So this is the request that you send to the server. And here we have the response headers. So that's the response back from the server. And if we look inside of the request headers, we can see a content type of application XVVV form URL encoded. So we can, in good confidence, set this data to be the same. Now we need to pass in some data. And the first data I usually try is the most obvious one, which is the email and the password. I'm going to show you sort of my process as I try to figure out how to actually get this login working. I already know how we can get it working, but I'm going to show you how my process is for getting it working. So by that I mean basically we copy this form data here, for example input email handle, and then we pass it in here as a key in the body tab, and then write in the value we have also. So this is my email. And then we also need a password. Here it's called input password. And notice that these values can be different basically based on what site you are on. So maybe Amazon just calls it email, or they just call it password. It depends on how they made this site up. But for Craigslist, they just call it input email handle and input password. So copy password or input password key as well, and then copy the value as well we have here, paste it in, and now let's try and do the request and see what response we get from Craigslist. So you can see here we get a 404 not found, which means that our which means that our request was not successful. It says page not found. So something went wrong. We didn't give Craigslist all the data that they wanted. They're not just happy with just the email and password, it seems. So then what I would do, if this doesn't work at first, then I would try other values maybe inside of the form data. Maybe we can try the browser info data we have here. Let's try and paste it in inside the value. Then say browser info, just like that. And then I would try again to see, does it work now? And we can see it still doesn't work. It still says 404 not found. Then I could try other ones, like this one. It's called T. Maybe that's something they really want to have with the form. So I tried that one also. And it still doesn't work. And now maybe I try all of these data as well. Also this one maybe. I try them all step by step and see, is there any point where I suddenly can be enabled to log in? You can see it still doesn't work. And then if I try all of the form data and try to basically copy all of that inside of Postman and it still doesn't work, then the next step maybe is to look at your request headers. Make sure that you set your request headers inside Postman the same as we have in here. So I can see there's a content type. We already have that because we selected this one here. So Postman is already setting that for us. Then I can see there's one with cookie. There's a cookie being set when we log into Craigslist just without logging in. I mean, just as you visit the site, Craigslist is going to set a cookie. Maybe it could be that, but let's save that for later. There's also an accept header. Maybe we can try that. So I'm going to copy the value here. And then inside the headers tab, I will write accept and then paste in the value. Let's see if that works now. And it still doesn't work. So I just keep on trying all of these things. I mean, some things are more sensible or reasonable to make a difference. It's something you learn by practice basically on different sites. Maybe the origin site the origin header information could work. So let's try that. Origin, and then set the value in here from the Chrome developer tab. And then let's try again. Still says 441 not found. So that's pretty much the process as I try to find out how can I log in. User agent is also a really good thing you could try to see if that works. So let's try and set the user agent. Then paste that in. No, it still doesn't work. And then finally, at some point, you arrive at something that just works. So let's try referrer. Referrer means, well, what site are we getting referred from? I mean, you are on the site and then you get a refer from that site and you send that to this endpoint so it knows where does this request come from. And let's try again. And now it says 200 okay. So now I've actually logged in. And let's see. What does the site say? It says here, home of Stefan Hültoft. That's my name, which means that I have logged in. It also says log out here. So now I have actually logged in using Postman. You can see in here in the cookies also we have a CL session cookie being set with this value here. And it has an expiry date, which is really far out in the future, 2068. So if you are logged into Craigslist, you are really logged in for a long time. But that's how it works. You simply try a lot of things, like the form data and the headers. Just try a lot of things until it simply works. Until you find out what is actually needed to make yourself logged in. And then once I finally find something that actually makes me logged in, I try to disable other values I've set until now. So I don't have to set a lot of values when I'm using request. For example, let's try and just take off all of these extra form data we tried before. Let's see if our request still works. And I can see it still works. I still get a 200 OK response. So I am still logged in. Now let's try and remove some of the header values we have here. Let's try and remove the accept, origin, and user agent. And now I can see I still get a 200 OK. Now let's try and remove the referrer again. And here we can see I get a 404 not found. So the referrer header was apparently the key to getting this request work. And this can really be different between what sort of... so here you can see it says 404 not found. Sometimes it does say 404 not found. I found out when I'm debugging this. And you just have to try again, it seems, and then it's locking you in. But what I was trying to say is that finding out what is important when you log in and stuff like this is very different from site to site, based on how they programmed or created the login functionality. They make different steps necessary, so to say, different values. Sometimes you have to pass. You have to put all of the form data in as it is from Google Chrome. Sometimes you can get away with just the email and password. Sometimes you don't have to set any headers at all. Sometimes you have to set lots of headers and weird headers also. So you have to look inside of your Chrome developer tab, look at all the values and try them one by one inside of Postman until you get something that just clicks and works. And then once you get something that clicks and works, you tick off all of the boxes until you find the minimum required to make it work, which is going to make your life a lot easier as we in the next section make the request inside of Node.js. So I'll see you in the next section where we are going to use request in Node.js. So now let's move on to Visual Studio Code or whatever editor you prefer to use, and let's start making our project with Node.js and request. First, let's initialize a project. So let's go ahead and make a directory first. Let's call it Craigslist off scraper. Let's go inside that directory and initialize npm so we can download some packages with npm init -- yes. Then let's open that directory inside of Visual Studio Code. And let's go and say Craigslist off scraper. Okay, so now we have the off scraper opened inside Visual Studio Code. Let's go ahead and make an index.js file. And then let's also open our terminal so we can import some packages, because we're going to need, so we say yarn add, we're going to need request and request promise. That's it. So now let's import request up here. So require request promise. All of this is basically something you already know from the previous Craigslist tutorials. And now let's say we have a async function main. And then let's run main down here. Now let's try and make our request. So const HTML, await request. And then we say post because we are making a post request. And then we paste in the URL that we found from the Chrome developer tab and used inside of Postman, and paste it in here. And then let's also put this inside of a try catch clause, so any errors get logged. Catch error and say console error. Now we need some way to pass in this form data. If we look inside of the request promise documentation, if you scroll down a bit, look around, you can see there are some sections about how to post data. And there's also one about how to post like HTML forms do. And the way they do that is you simply set this form object with keys and values. And they're going to set the header of content type to be this XBBB form URL encoded. So that's basically what we need to do. So let's put a little comma here, curly braces, and then write form, and then another curly brace, and here we pass in the key and values of this form data. So let's go ahead, look inside of Postman, inside the body, and then let's paste copy the key here, input email handle, and paste in the value. And the same for the password, input password. And let's copy the password. So now we have all of the form data. Next up is the headers. Remember, we had to set a refer header in order to make our login request successful. So go ahead and copy the value of the refer header, and then make another comma here and make a headers object and put in the refer and the value. So now we set a refer header inside of our request. So that's all we needed to make it work inside of Postman. Now let's see if it works inside of request. So to see if it works, let's try and say import fs just to save the HTML result and check it out once it's done. So write file sync, and then we can check if the login actually is working. So let's try and run node index.js. And now it doesn't look like it actually saved the file, which means it probably never came to this point. And it also threw out a huge response object, which means it probably threw an exception instead and did a console error. And the first thing I always try and look for is the response code. So let's look for the response code. We have status code here of 302 says found, which is actually the same as we have inside of the Chrome developer tag. The Chrome developer tools. Interestingly enough, it is also 302 found, so it's not a bad sign that we get it. Though we do get a 200 OK inside of Postman. But let's try and work around this somehow. By default, request is going to treat any other response status code than 2xx as an error. So if you get something like 302 like we did just now, it's going to treat it as an error and throw an exception. So therefore we never get to this point where we can check out the actual response HTML. So in order to disable this check for if you have a, if it's going to throw an exception, we need to make another option that is called simple and set it to false. You can read up about this also in their documentation. If you try and search a little for, let's try and search, it also says up here almost at the top, by default HTTP response codes other than 2xx will cause the promise to be rejected. This can be overridden by setting the options simple to false. So that's simply what we are doing. We are setting this simple to be false, so it's going to not treat this 302 as an error and throw an exception. Now, let's try and see how the response looks now. So now you can see it did go further because it did not throw an exception, and it started writing the login HTML. So as you can see, it is disappointingly empty, this login.html. Now another thing that could be causing this empty login HTML is that we are not following the redirects that the server is trying to make us do. By default, Postman is always going to follow redirects, and of course the same inside of Chrome. But by default, request does not follow all redirects. Let's try and search for redirect in here. And there's no results for redirect inside of request promise documentation. But if you look inside just request documentation, which is what request promise is based on, and try to search for redirect, it says it follows redirects by default, but there is some kind of catch to this. It is only HTTP 300 responses that it follows redirects for. So, well, even though we get a 302 response, I'm just going to try and set follow all redirects to true anyway. See if it works. It could be that it makes a difference. Let's try and see again how index.html looks like. So now we actually get some kind of HTML. By setting the symbol to false, so we moved on to writing the file, and setting follow all redirects to true, we also got a file being written. But it doesn't look like we are actually logged in yet. It still says Craigslist account login. And if I go down and look, I can still see it still looks like it is asking us to log in. It's not the actual account page I'm seeing here. There's also something about creating account. This is just the login page we're seeing here. One last option that you can do is to enable the cookie jar. So cookie jar, by that I mean the storage of all your cookies. Postman is saving all of the cookies that the request wants you to save. So it's going to save those. And the same for Chrome developer tools as well. I mean, Chrome browser. So let's try and set saving cookie jar or saving cookies to be true. You do that by simply saying jar true. So let's say node.index.js again. And let's look at the file. And ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we are logged in now. So here you can see home of Stefan Hülshoff. That is me. Logout, postings, drafts, searches, settings, billing, and so on. So that is actually the site. If I try to log in, so you can see it again. So here you can see the site when you're logged in, home of Stefan Hülshoff, with the menu up here, drafts, searches, billing. Remember, our objective is to go to this site inside of billing. So how can you do that? Because you can't just do a post request on this site, really. Maybe you could, but sometimes you have to log in first and then navigate around in the site. So how do we get onto this billing site once we are logged in inside of request? Well, it is fairly simple to do it once you got this done. The thing we need to do first is to make sure that we have this cookie jar enabled for all of our requests. So it's going to save all of the cookies for any other requests we make after this login. So go and remove this jar up here, the jar true, and then up here where we imported, let's say dot defaults, And then in the options, we say char true. So now this request object is going to save the cookie char for any request. I mean, it can use the cookies for any request you make. So after we log in up here, we can do another request down here, where we say const billing HTML maybe, and say await request dot get this time, because we're just getting things, and paste in the URL of this billing site we have here. And then let's try and do another file write to check how our response looks. Say billing.html, billing. Just like that. And now let's try and run Node index.js again. So now our billing.html file got written. We are still logged in, I can see. And our billing, how does that look like? It says, how does it look? It says here, paid posting accounts. No paid posting accounts exist, which is exactly what there is inside of this billing page. So now we are successfully logged in. We can go into any site inside once we are logged in. And that is because that the request object is saving this cookie that we get once we log in. This session cookie that I talked about earlier, which tells Craigslist that we are logged in and we are authenticated. So that is it, folks. That is how you make a login with request, how you find out where you need to log in, what data you need to pass on to log in, and how you make the request inside of Node.js request. So the process to do all of this is to first look inside your network tab, try to make a login, find out what log here is the login itself. When you want, then once you find it, try to make the same request inside of Postman until you find out what headers, body, whatever is necessary to make this request work, the login work. And then once you're done with that, the next step is to make it work inside of Node.js request. As you could see, there was also some things you needed to change, even though we had the same headers and form data. Because request is a little different from Postman. It's a bit more raw or simplistic, you could say. So that is it, folks. I hope that you can use this for a lot of things. I have used it for a lot of things, and I hope you have lots of good productive work out of it. So thank you for watching, and in the next section I'm going to show you also how to log in if you can't get this to work, if you can't for some reason figure out how to make this work inside of Postman with the Chrome developer tools, or maybe the site is a more JavaScript site and you can't use an API. The last option to do is to use Puppeteer, which I'm also going to show you how to use. So what if you couldn't get your request working when you're looking inside of Chrome developer tools? You couldn't figure out how to get the login request, or you couldn't figure out how to replicate it inside of Postman. Well, there's a fix for that, and that is to use Puppeteer. Now, it is going to be the last option I would use because Puppeteer launches a browser, a Chrome browser, and automates it, which uses a lot more resources than request and is a lot more prone to crashing. It is a bit more heavy on resources, so if you need to run it somewhere, it's going to take more resources. So it's going to be the last option I would use. but it is a viable option to use. I'm going to show you how to do it if you can't make it work otherwise. So first, let's go ahead inside of Visual Studio Code, make a new directory. Let's call it Craigslist Puppeteer, and then initialize npm -yes. Then let's go ahead and open the project inside of Visual Studio Code. Then let's go inside the terminal again. And this time let's say yarn add Puppeteer. And it might take some time for you if it's the first time you're downloading Puppeteer. It's quite a big package because it's getting all of the Chrome browser basically. Now, once that is done, let's go ahead and make an index.js file. And let's import Puppeteer. And then let's make a main function as we always do. And call it down here. Let's also put a try catch clause around it just for good measure. Okay. Now, first thing we need to do is to make the browser instantiate the browser inside of Puppeteer. So we go const browser await Puppeteer launch, and then let's put in the headless and set that to false so we can see the browser. If you're deploying the browser on some server somewhere, then you probably want to set this to false or just keep it by default by removing the parameter. But while we are debugging, it's really nice to be able to see the browser. So let's go ahead and type in node index.js and see what happens. So here you can see it launched a new Chrome browser window. It says Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. So that is how far we got so far. Now let's make a new page. So we say const page await and then browser dot new page. And then we simply say go to a specific URL. So await page go to, and then we paste in the URL of this Craigslist login site. So I'm going to log out. And then we have this URL here with the form to log in. Then let's paste in the URL here. And let's see what we got now. So let's start it up again. And now you can see it opens up the browser. It goes to a new tab. And it starts to go to the site where we can log in. Now what we need to do now is to type in our email and our password, and then we need to press the login button. So how do you do that inside of Puppeteer? Well, it is quite easy. We simply say await page.type, and then we need to put in the CSS selector for this element that we want to type into. So if you open up Chrome Developer Tools and you use the select element over here, point on the form input element you want to input on. For example, this one, you can see it's a type of input and it has an element ID of input email handle. And you could also see when I hover my mouse over, the CSX selector is right up there in the upper left corner, saying input with the hashtag input email handle. So let's use that as our CSS selector. So then we say input hashtag input email handle. Let's check if yeah, that was correctly spelled. And then put a comma, and then you type in the text that you want to type in. Now let's see how that works. So there we go. So now it went to the site and it also typed in my email in the login form. You can also pass another optional parameter or option with a delay. So if you want to have a delay on say 20 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds for some reason, then you can do that. But for now it works without, so let's keep it simple. Then let's say we also need the password, so we need to find out what is the CSS selector for this password. So again, we hover the selector over here, and I can see that it's input #input password. So we say await, type, input password, and then I paste in my password, which I can't remember in my head, so oops, just like that. And yeah, so let's make another test and see if it types in the password. And it does. So now I just need to click on the login button. And again, it's very similar to when you use the type, you just say click instead of type. So page.click, and then put in the CSS selector of the element that you want to click. Then you go into Chrome Developer Tools, find out the CSS selector. I can see that, let's move this array here. We can see this is button with the ID of login, and the class is account form button. But let's try and just say button #login, with the login is the ID, which you can also see if you look in here. Here's the element, there's the ID, and there's the class. Let's just use the element and ID. That should be enough to select this element. So the element here and the ID. And again, you can also set a delay here if you want to do that, but we're not going to use it because it's not necessary in this situation. For some sites, maybe you want to make your scraping look a little more human-like and you want to put in some random delays that could happen. But for this site, it works fine without. So there we go. And now it is logged into my account, and it went into my account page where I can see my my posting in here. And we also need to go to the billing page, which is our objective in this scraping project. And so then we need to log in and then go to the billing page. So let's see how we can do that. So obviously the most natural thing you might want to do is to say await page.goto, and then let's put in the URL we have up here for the billing page. So we go ahead and do that, and let's see what happens. So as you can see, nothing happens. We're not being redirected to the billing page. We're not even logged in. And if you were really fast, you can see that it typed in my login information. It clicked on the login, but then it went straight to this billing page instead of waiting for the login to actually finish. That's what a human would do. We would wait until the login has finished, and then we would click on the billing page to go to the billing page. So how do we do that, or how do we make Puppeteer know to do that as well? The way is to say await page.wait for navigation, and that's it. Now it's going to wait until this redirect has happened and the page has loaded. So let's see what happens now. And there we go. So it was quite fast, but it did exactly what we wanted to. It went and logged in, and then it went on to the billing page once the navigation has finished. And now if we want to get this value here, then we can use Cheerio instead. So let me just stop this one here, and then let's say yarn add Cheerio. Then let's import Cheerio up here. And now we can say const content await page content. And then we can say const jQuery sign or $sign await Cheerio load content. And then let's find out what the CSS selector is for this building. So if you go and click and select this element here, let's say that's what we want to scrape. We can try and say right click here, say copy selector. Let's see how that selector looks like. It looks okay, reasonable. If I try it out in the console here, .text, I can see that we indeed get the text that I like to have. So let's just copy that selector and use it inside of our Cheerio. And then we can say .text as well. And let's just say console log so we can see if we are successful. Now let's try and run it again and see if it works. Now let's check our console log. And we can see no paid posting accounts exist, which means that it indeed did get this information here. So that is it, people. That is how you can, as a last resort, as sort of using a big hammer to put in the nail in the wood, so to say. That is the last option you can use if you can't figure out how to use Postman or request Node.js to log in. Now, as I said before, it does use more resources than request in Node.js. It is a bit more prone to crashing. If you're loading up a full page, your browser can crash. But it is a perfectly viable solution if you can't figure out how to do the login request. Some sites are just really weird, or you can't figure out how you can get this request working inside of Postman. And then at some point you can simply say, okay, I'm just going to do this inside of Puppeteer instead. That is a perfectly fine solution. And I hope you can use this to log in and scrape any other sites you may have in the future. So that is it, people. If you have any other suggestions or questions, let me know.